Hello everyone, and welcome to this recorded webinar on Erasmus Plus Key Action 1 Vet, Learner and Staff Mobility. Today's webinar is all about preparing you and giving you the information you need to deliver your KA1 adult education or vet project. My name is Kira and my colleague's name is Rebecca, and we work in the Erasmus Plus team at Stories UK. Together we will be delivering this pre-recorded webinar. For any questions specific to your organisation, these can be emailed to the Erasmus Plus inbox, erasmusplus@ecoris.com, with Newcomer webinar 240620 as the subject. Please note that throughout the course of this webinar, we will be mentioning your project officer, who will be your main point of contact at the NA. As of yet, this information has not been disclosed to you, but your project officer will be communicating with you very shortly. Just to give you an overview of what we'll be covering, here is the agenda for today's webinar. We will try to cover everything you need to run a successful project, including information on managing your grant and reporting. The webinar will last approximately 1 hour, 30 minutes. I will now go over Key Action 1 Vet and Adult Ed projects as a whole. Under Key Action 1 Mobility, activities aim to bring positive and long-lasting effects on the participants and participating organisations through undertaking a learning or professional experience in another programme country. Under Key Action 1 Vet or Key Action 102 projects, learners, apprentices and students in vocational training schools, as well as recent graduates from vet schools and companies, can undertake a placement at a workplace or vet school abroad, relevant to their enrolled course of study. Mobilities are set within a quality framework agreed by the sending and receiving organisations to ensure a high level of activity quality. The mobility activity and its learning outcomes are formally recognised and validated upon completion. The overall aim of this mobility being to strengthen the employability of participants and facilitate their transition into the labour market. Specific to learners, the funding can be used to support apprentices and vet students enrolled on an iVet programme within a vet organisation. The placement must include work-based learning at a vet organisation, employer, or other relevant organisation. Vocational study alone is not permitted. Activities can last from 2 weeks, 10 working days, to 12 months, unless it is a long-term Erasmus Pro mobility, which lasts from 3 to 9 months. Under Key Action 1 Vet, staff from vet schools can undertake teaching, training assignments to teach or provide training at a partner vet school or organisation abroad, or undertake staff training abroad to support professional development through a work placement, job shadowing, or observation period at another vet organisation. Vet staff can develop their competencies in line with the aims of their participating organisation to modernise, internationalise, and gain competencies to address the needs of learners and the needs of the labour market. In the case of teaching and/or training assignments, Key Action 1 is open to persons from enterprises, public sector and/or civil society organisations, as well as to the typical target group of vet trainers, managers and support staff. It is also possible for vet organisations in the UK to host vet staff from abroad for a period of mobility such as training. Under Key Action 1 Adult Education, staff in the field of adult education can undertake teaching or training assignments to teach or provide training at a partner organisation abroad in the adult education field, or undertake staff training abroad to support professional development through structured courses or through activities such as job shadowing at another organisation active in adult education. The overall aim is to develop the skills of adult education staff to enhance the provision of adult education. activities last from 2 days to 2 months. On the screen is a very simplified idea of what the project lifecycle looks like. Of course, it isn't quite this easy, but this encompasses the main stages of any project's lifecycle. There are 3 main aspects to a Key Action 1 mobility project. Number 1, project management. This includes preparing for your project by setting up appropriate project and financial management systems. This might include things like having a project timeline or setting up spreadsheets to record expenditure, setting up a filing system to store hard copy evidence, creating templates, meeting with project staff, etc. The focus is on having robust systems in place to manage and deliver your project, which is very important, and the national agency will expect to see evidence of these during any checks or audits of your project, particularly if you have multiple mobilities or a high number of participants. It can be easy to lose paperwork or confuse details, so it is imperative that these processes are set up in plenty of time and that they are robust. Number 2, delivering the mobilities. This covers everything from the recruitment and selection of participants to the completion of the participant reports after the mobilities have finished. This also includes liaising with your European partners to ensure that the details of the mobilities are finalized before the participants are sent. It is important to remember that after the mobility has taken place, all participants who went must complete the participant report to prevent any funding being deducted. Absence of participant reports means we cannot count the participant as actually having taken part in the mobility. Number 3, follow-up. This includes evaluating and disseminating your project. It's important to make sure that your project has an impact beyond your partners and participants at a regional level. For example, focus is on identifying the best channels and audiences to engage with, which will help you effectively disseminate your project and have the widest possible impact. It is also good to think about how you will evaluate the project's successes and any areas of improvement. If your project only has one flow of mobilities, it might have a linear structure like the one on the screen. But if your project involves different flows at different times during the project, you're likely to experience a lot of crossover between these aspects. However, the principles are the same. It is important to have the processes in place to track each flow of mobilities. Now I will briefly go through some of your responsibilities for managing your grant and what support you can expect from your project officer at the national agency. Your responsibilities will be slightly different depending on whether you're the sole beneficiary or the coordinator of a UK consortium. As a sole beneficiary, you are responsible for ensuring that your project is implemented in line with the activities planned in your application and within the rules outlined in the grant agreement. Therefore, you need to be fully aware of the content of your grant agreement. You must inform us of any changes you wish to make, as some of them may not be eligible, in which case funding provided cannot be used to cover them. Please let your project officer know of any proposed changes. All documents need to be kept in the event of a desk check or if the national agency ever requests them. As mentioned before, please ensure the templates that are provided in your grant agreement are used, as we or the EC will expect to see them when completing checks and/or audits. IT tools, such as Mobility Tool Plus and Participant Portal, have to be used consistently throughout the delivery of the project. It is also really important to submit your reports in line with what is stipulated in your grant agreement. Failure to do so could result in late payments to your project or no payment if deadlines are missed and the necessary documentation is not provided. As a consortium coordinator, you have the same responsibilities as a sole beneficiary, but you also need to make sure Your consortium partners are aware of all the eligibility requirements for activities and costs and act as a liaison if any information is updated either by the national agency or one of your consortium members. It is your responsibility to inform your consortium members that they need to update documents and update the portal if things change that we would need to be aware of. Eligibility. On screen are some areas to consider with regards to whether a project's activities are eligible within the relevant activity area of the Erasmus Plus programme. Please note that not all areas have the same eligibility criteria. Therefore, please refer to the relevant section of the Erasmus Plus programme guide. Eligible organisations must be active in the field of vet or adult education and established in the UK. Participants need to be either vet learners studying vet qualifications or who are within 1 year of graduating, vet staff working on vets, or adult education staff working in delivering adult education. The UK National Agency recommends a minimum ratio of 1 accompanying person to 10 learners. The duration of mobilities are 2 weeks to 3 months for vet short-term mobilities, 3 to 12 months for Erasmus Pro, or 2 days to 2 months for staff for both adult education and vets. Countries involved must be programme countries. Please refer to the programme guide and your grant agreement for information on eligible budget expenditure. OLS and linguistic support are different, and OLS is for vet learners with a mobility of 19 days to 12 months and is free. We will provide more detail later on. Please ensure that any staff members you send on mobilities as accompanying persons should not be recorded as staff mobilities. We'll now cover your grant agreement. The grant agreement explained. It is important to remember the grant agreement is a legally binding contract between you as the beneficiary of a Key Action 1 project and the UK National Agency. The grant agreement covers the requirements for managing your grants, including eligible costs and activities. So it is very important that you take the time to familiarise yourself with the information that is in the agreement. This information includes key details regarding your project. These are things such as your project start and end date, your grant amount and budget details, payment amounts and dates, and reporting deadlines. As well as tailored information about your project, the grant agreement is also a good resource when you need some guidance for managing your grant and how to deliver your mobilities. And finally, the grant agreement includes template documents that need to be used to formalize the responsibilities, requirements, and learning objectives between you and your participants. There are templates which you must use for this, and if you receive a visit or are subject to some form of check from the national agency, you will need to show your use of these templates where relevant. There are a multitude of requirements and stipulations contained in the grant agreement, and this webinar will cover the key points. It is vital that the coordinator for the project, the finance team, and anyone else supporting with implementation of the project needs to read it and make sure you are aware of what you have agreed to. The 2020 handbook that will be issued to all beneficiaries will include more information to help with understanding your grant agreement, including how to use the European Commission template annexes. All grant agreements follow the same general structure and will have special conditions, which is where you can find the key action, field, and project-specific information for managing your project. This is individualized depending on what was in your application and what project you intend to deliver. There is also Annex 1 General Conditions, which explains the standard rules for all EU grants. Annex 2 is a description of the project, which breaks down the overall budget for the project by budget heading and by different activity types, as well as including a list of all participating organisations. Annex 3 are the financial and contractual rules. This is key action and field-specific information focused on eligible costs, triggering events, reporting, and evidence requirements. A triggering event, as described by the European Commission, is the event that conditions the entitlement to the grant and is that which the participant has actually undertaken the activity abroad for the specified period. In essence, it is when the actual activity is completed by the participants and they can demonstrate attendance on a mobility. Annex 4, applicable rates, key action and field-specific unit costs for each of the budget headings for UK projects. Annex 5, template agreements. Template agreements created by the EC, designed to assist you in delivering your project. Templates vary between adult education and vet. Mandatory templates for UK organisations are the learning agreements, staff mobility agreements, and participant grant agreements. Annex 6 covers the General Data Protection Act. This new annex sets out GDPR requirements in relation to Erasmus Plus grants. And for consortium projects only, there is Annex 7, which includes signed agreements between the applicant organisation and UK consortium members. Now we will go into more detail regarding the grant agreement. Let's start with special conditions. This is where you can find information that is specific to your project, so it is very important for you to familiarise yourself with what you have agreed with the UK National Agency. The special conditions include a contents page to help you find the information you need when you need it. All the information in your agreement is important and will help you manage your grant and implement your project successfully. But we want to highlight some of the key articles for you since 2019. The articles on the slide are from the special conditions. For special conditions, they are: budget transfer rules can be found in Special Conditions Article 1.3.3. This section outlines the set rules for making budget transfers. We will go over this in greater detail later in the webinar. Reporting. Both interim reports when applicable and final reports and your own payment structures can be found in Special Conditions Article 1.41 to Article 1.44. These articles give you the dates by which reports should be submitted and the stipulations for triggering payments. They also contain your project's payment structure. Exchange rates can be found in Special Conditions Article 1.4.9. The exchange rate for your project should always be taken from the day you received your most recent payment from the National Agency, and the rate should always be calculated from the Commission's own currency conversion tool. Bank details and contact details can be found in Special Conditions Article 1.5 and Article 1.6.2 respectively. The National Agency can only issue funds into this account and contact the individual stated in this article, with the exception of the designated legal representative. Next is Annex 1, which is the general conditions. Please note that the EU funding rules outlined here are not solely for Erasmus+, which is why you should read it alongside Article 1.17 of the Special Conditions, as this explains any differences in how you should understand the general conditions specifically for Erasmus+. Once again, you should read all the information in the general conditions, as it is important to know in order to manage your grant. But I do just want to highlight a key article. Next is Annex 2, which covers the budget and participating organisations. This is where you can find the breakdown of your grant amount by budget heading and the activity type. There is a clear breakdown of your grant, which should be easy to understand, which will contribute to managing your grant overall. Annex 2 also includes a list of all the other participating organisations in your project. You should use Annex 2 when implementing your project to make sure that you're completing the same activities that you planned in your application. This is very important because the national agency will use Annex 2 of your agreement during the assessment of your final report. Annex 3 covers the rules for your project. Annex 3 is where you can find out all the rules for how to evidence eligible costs for each of the budget headings in your project, as well as all the financial rules and requirements. Annex 3 also provides some key Action 1 specific information about the types of checks the national agency may undertake on your project and how your final report will be assessed and the impact this may have on your final grant amount. Annex 4 is where you can find the amounts for the unit costs for all budget headings and how these are calculated. Both special needs support and exceptional costs will not be included here since these are based on actual costs. Annex 4 has the specific unit costs for UK beneficiaries, so you should use this if you need to make any budget transfers. Now we will cover some information on your budget. Key Action 1 budget costs can be eligible or ineligible. However, I would suggest you refer to the Annex 1, Article 2.19, eligible costs of your grant agreement, where you can find more additional information about the eligibility of costs incurred. There are two types of budget costs, unit costs and real costs. Unit costs are set rates for country groups, specific activities which are based on the number of participants and the duration of the activities. Real costs are actual costs incurred for supporting disadvantaged participants and/or participants with special needs. For all costs, all project activities and costs incurred must take place within your project start and end dates, as noted in your signed grant agreement, and must be related to the project. All project activities and costs must be incurred in connection with the project as outlined in Annex 2 and 3 in order to avoid any ineligible expenditure or maintain eligibility following budget transfers. All costs must also be identifiable and verifiable, in particular supported by records and documentation. All costs must reflect what was planned in the application. Ineligible costs. Your contracts specify the project's start and end dates and any activities undertaken outside of this timeframe, be that anything from recruitment to dissemination, will be deemed as ineligible and will not be covered by the funding. All funding is paid in euros, and the national agency always advises you to set up a euro account prior to contracting, as this will help to reduce losses incurred due to exchange rates. Any losses incurred as a result of currency exchange will not be covered by the funding, and any bank charges or interest incurred during the project are not covered by the funding and should be absorbed by the beneficiary. Any costs incurred by sending participants to countries not participating in the project will not be covered by the funding. All projects have been approved based on the information provided in the application, so any changes to these details will need to be approved by the national agency. Any major changes to your project which are not approved by the NA will not be covered by Erasmus Plus funding. There are further ineligible costs and activities detailed in Annex 1. If you are unsure or have any questions, please contact your project officer. Let's move on now to some aspects related to the financial management of your Erasmus Plus grant. This is your grant. Your grant is made up of different budget headings, some of which are available to all grants and others that are available depending on what type of application you have and the funding you are awarded. The top three, individual support, organisational support and travel, are applicable to all types of projects and are unit costs. Linguistic support, which is applicable for some VET projects only, is a unit cost, as is course fees, which apply only to adult education projects. Finally, special needs and exceptional costs, which are only applicable if you have had this approved at application stage, are actual costs. Please note that your grant agreement gives you the option to transfer funds between some of these budget headings to give you more flexibility with your grants and to help you manage some changes that might come up during your project. We will now go over these on the next slide. Budget transfers. First and foremost, no approval from the national agency is required for budget transfers. This being said, we recommend you contact your project officer if you plan on doing one, so as to avoid carrying out a transfer that could lead to ineligible costs. The full rules for budget transfers can be found in Article 1.3.3 of your grant agreement. This sets out the circumstances in which you can transfer funding between budget headings. Due to the new structure of applications since 2019, there is a lot more flexibility for budget transfers. For example, durations and numbers of participants are given as estimates, meaning you can change the numbers going on or the duration of a single mobility freely. Although budget transfers offer a degree of flexibility in managing your grants, there are conditions and restrictions that apply, which are detailed in the present slide. Funds allocated to organisational support may not be increased. 20% of the total funds allocated for Erasmus Pro activities may be transferred to other types of activities. Funds allocated for Erasmus Pro advanced planning visits may be increased by a maximum of 20%. Funds initially allocated for staff mobilities may be increased by a maximum of 20%. Funds allocated for special needs support and exceptional costs may not be transferred to another budget category. When planning to make a budget transfer, you should first consider how the change will affect the achievement of the original project objectives or results. If you're ever unsure, please speak to your project officer at the national agency for clarification. If planning to use budget transfers within your project, you should make sure it is in line with what your grant allows, and make sure this is explained within your final report at the end of your project. It is also highly advised to let your project officer at the national agency know, so that when we monitor Mobility Tool Plus, we can understand if any budget headings are looking higher or lower than expected. Please find on screen 3 examples of budget transfers. The first shows that 10 learners are due to attend placements with an organisation in Germany and another 10 with an organisation in Italy. Only 9 can be recruited for Italy. The one unfilled place can be used to fund an 11th place on the German mobility via a budget transfer. The second scenario is that you did not apply for special needs funding, but a participant requires support to participate. Funding from the organisational support can be reallocated to special needs to pay for the additional costs via a budget transfer. A third scenario is that a staff mobility with 2 participants can no longer take place. The funding would allow for 4 additional learner mobilities to take place. These can be funded via a budget transfer. However, only 2 participants would be eligible for organisational support. It could be possible that due to a series of circumstances during the life cycle of your project will finish with an underspent budget. If this is the case, then there could be two scenarios. Firstly, that the final grant amount is reduced, but a final payment is still due. In this scenario, the NA will recalculate the amount of the final payment as soon as the qualitative and financial assessments on your final report are completed, and you will receive the outcome letter confirming the updated payment amount you will receive. You will be given a 3-day deadline to confirm you accept the revised payment. Secondly, that the final grant amount is reduced and a refund is due. In this scenario, the grant requested at final report stage is lower than the amount of the pre-financing payment. Therefore, the national agency will need to request a refund as soon as the financial and qualitative assessments on your final report are completed. You will receive the outcome letter confirming the amount the NA needs to recover, and you will be given a 3-day deadline to inform us if you intend to appeal. Now we will cover budgets in Mobility Tool Plus. As your project progresses and you enter your mobilities in Mobility Tool Plus, which will be covered later on, your budget will calculate automatically. When clicking in the Budget tab, you will have an overview of the budget inserted so far against the budget awarded. You are required to manually update the organizational support cost before submitting your final report. The organizational support budget is calculated on a per participant basis, excluding accompany persons, and Mobility Tool Plus will suggest the import to insert, which will come up in a small blue window above the current budget section. This section will go through some information relevant to the management of your project. Record keeping is an essential component of managing your grant. There are certain documents that you are required to keep on file in order to evidence the activities of your project. As per Annex 1, Article 2.20.2, for actual costs, adequate supporting documents to prove the cost declared, such as contracts, invoices, and accounting records. In addition, the beneficiary's usual accounting and internal control procedures must permit direct reconciliation of the amounts declared with the amounts recorded in its accounting statements and with the amounts indicated in the supporting documents. For unit costs or unit contributions, adequate supporting documents to prove the number of units declared. The type of documents set out in this annex are not explicitly identified, as there is a wide variety of ways to record your financial expenditure. Rather, it sets out the requirements that you must retain proof of your financial expenditure against the different budget headings. The main source of information for record keeping can be found in Annex 3 of your grant agreement. In this annex, the requirements are broken down by budget category. Firstly, travel, organizational support, and individual support costs, which are unit costs. From Annex 3, proof of attendance of the activity in the form of a declaration signed by the receiving organization specifying the name of the participant, the purpose of the activity, as well as its starting and end date, commonly referred to as a certificate of attendance. These documents are required for all participants, staff, and accompanying persons. Secondly, exceptional costs and special needs costs. From Annex 3, in the case of costs related to the participation of learners with fewer opportunities, invoices of the actual costs incurred, specifying the name and address of the body issuing the invoice, the amount and the currency, and the date of the invoice. In the case of travel costs, proof of payment of the related costs on the basis of invoices specifying the name and address of the body issuing the invoices, the amount and currency, the date of the invoice, and the travel route. In addition, the learner or staff agreements and grant agreement templates annexed to your grant agreement are compulsory and to be used, and these documents retained. There may be occasions where changes happen during the implementation of your project. This section will provide an overview of the different types of changes to a project. Budget transfers, the reallocation of funds from one budget category to another, or a change to the structure of mobilities that alters the content of Annex 2 of your grant agreement. There is a new increased level of flexibility for budget transfers in 2020 for projects. Changes not included in the grant agreement also include minor changes and significant changes, which we will now talk about in more depth. Minor changes are administrative changes to the project that require approval. A formal request and approval is required by the NA as minor changes alter some of the content in the grant agreement. Beneficiaries are required to submit a minor change form and complete the relevant actions detailed in the form. Examples of these include changes to the contact person or legal representative, changes to your bank details, and a change in the number of OLS licenses required. Minor changes are typically always approved. No supplementary agreements are required for minor changes. Significant changes are deviations from the delivery of the project, as outlined in your application form, and as such they may result in altering the project-specific content of the grant agreement. Therefore, they have the potential to call into question the decision of the initial application assessment or have a significant financial and legal impact. To request a significant change, you are expected to submit a formal contract amendment request, providing a clear justification for the proposed changes. Requests must be submitted well in advance and no later than a month prior to the project end date or when the change is due to take place. Example of these are a change to the nature of the project activities or a change to the organization's legal status. The request will be formally assessed by the NA, and if approved, a supplementary agreement will be produced and must be signed by both parties. It will then be annexed to the original grant agreement. Significant change requests are deemed exceptional and carry no guarantee of approval from the NA. Changes not permitted include the increase to project budget, project duration, reporting schedule, or a change of beneficiary organization. Both the NA and yourself as the beneficiary are responsible for monitoring the project throughout its life cycle. Monitoring activities help us to inspect the progress of the project and to check if activities undertaken are in line with the rules of the grant agreement and programme, as well as the objectives set out in the original application. This way we can recognise potential problems early on and offer help and advice if needed. This does not mean that you shouldn't contact us immediately when any problems arise or can be foreseen for your project. Monitoring will also help us identify best practice projects. We regularly invite projects to speak about their experience at one of our organised events, and we will pick projects that we are confident are delivering high quality mobilities and comply with our rules and regulations. Your project officer might also put forward best practice projects to be used as case studies for our website or general Erasmus Plus promotional material, giving your organisation and project a wider dissemination platform. Please remember you have a contractual obligation to provide us with project information if requested. Please refer to your grant agreement for further information on this. All projects will be subject to monitoring by the NA. The main way the NA will be able to monitor your project is in the Mobility Tool Plus. Using MT Plus, your project officer will be able to see that the project is progressing as expected by checking if information about the mobilities has been completed before a flow is expected to happen. More information on Mobility Tool Plus will be coming up shortly. The NA also conducts monitoring calls, monitoring visits, and in some cases financial desk checks, on-the-spot checks, and audits known as system checks. If your project has been selected for monitoring emails or calls, your project officer will contact you to organize a schedule. As a beneficiary, you are responsible for continuously evaluating the project and updating your project officer of any changes or developments. Regular monitoring is an essential part of this. Quarterly email and calls should include details of any issues with the host or consortium partners, details of financial management arrangements, any new project outcomes since the last monitoring email or call, evaluation and dissemination, and any possible issues. And of course, this is also your chance to tell us about areas that you are particularly proud of. This is also your chance to raise any questions or concerns you have as well. If your project officer is unable to answer your question immediately, they will get back to you within 2 days. Your project officer might also give you some recommendations or specific action points. The latter will have a clear deadline agreed by both parties, and you should make sure to get these resolved within the time frame given. It is a contractual obligation to provide all information requested by us and to take part in regular monitoring calls or emails if your project has been selected for one of them. Non-compliance may result in a suspension of your project until you provide the necessary information. You should therefore contact your project officer immediately if you foresee that you won't be available for the agreed phone call, or to send in the email as agreed and explain the reasons for this. A random selection of projects may be selected for monitoring visits and checks. They are a more in-depth method of monitoring projects and confirming the reality of activities. Monitoring visits focus on the quality of any results achieved and processes, rather than on conducting an in-depth financial check. The visit is an opportunity for you to take stock of the project achievements and review your progress against the objectives. You will also be able to seek clarification and guidance on any aspect of the project lifecycle. The NA will also explore examples of best practice from your project, which other projects may benefit from. The information gathered will also form part of our monitoring of the E+ program as a whole and be used to inform reports produced by the NA. During the visit, progress will be assessed against objectives set out in your original application. You will usually be visited by your project officer and another NA representative, which could include a member of our communications team or even our national authority, the Department of Education. The visit will usually last half a working day, but may be longer in some instances. Monitoring visits are supposed to be more practical and in-depth than monitoring calls or emails. We would therefore like to see templates and documents you use to run your project successfully. We also expect to meet at least one of your participants for part of the visit. Desk checks are an in-depth financial check of a project after final report submission and approval. It is undertaken at the NA's premises on the basis of supporting documents that you will be required to submit to us. Scanned copies of documents are usually requested, but you must keep originals at your premises. The purpose is to verify triggering events and costs, claims for real cost-based grants, such as special needs. A random selection of projects based on minimum numbers set by Commission are chosen. A desk check may lead to reductions of a grant if supporting documents are not available or not satisfactory. The documents you need to provide for desk checks include the declarations of attendance for all participants. You will need to have a declaration of attendance for each participant going on a flow, both for learners as well as staff mobilities. These need to be signed by the receiving organisation, show the correct name of the participant, the purpose of the activity, and the exact start and end dates as a minimum. You can include more information if you want to. There is a template for this in the KA1 Adult Education and Vet Handbook. Information about how individual support was paid to or on behalf of participants, exchange rates used in relation to any actual costs, participant grant agreements and learning and training agreements, certification or recognition of learning outcomes such as Europass Mobility and ECVET, linguistic support documents, example Declaration of Attendance of Language course. Linguistic support is only available for languages not offered on the OLS website. Course fees, which could include proof of enrolment in the course and of payment of a course fee, special needs invoices of actual costs incurred, and any other relevant evidence, such as proof of special needs. An on-the-spot check is similar to a desk check, which is undertaken at your premises, but as the national agency visit you, we will undertake a detailed check on accounting systems and also talk to staff. The purpose of the on-the-spot check is to provide assurance on the legality and eligibility of the project activities. During the check, the financial management and record keeping will be looked at to ensure it's appropriate. You should make sure that all necessary documents are available and the people dealing with the finance side of your project are present to answer any questions that might arise during the check. We will let you know ahead of time if your project has been chosen for an on-the-spot check and which documents should be provided. You should ensure all your documents are collected, filed correctly, and up to date continuously throughout the lifetime of your project. In addition to the documents needed for a desk check, some further documentation is required, including partner agreements, timelines, budget spreadsheets, and documentation proving your participants are eligible. The originals must be available for inspection during an on-the-spot check. A small number of projects will be subject to system checks, but as only recurrent beneficiaries who have run several projects already will be considered for system checks, we will not cover this now. Please refer to page 40 of Part 2 of the 2020 Handbook for more information surrounding these. This section will now cover some information on reporting. Interim reports are typically for any organisations that have payment structures that have 2 or more pre-financing payments. Therefore, this report needs to be submitted in order to request the next pre-financing instalment of your grant. Interim reports are submitted on a Word template, which will be sent to you by email along with guidance by your project officer. Interim reports are intended to provide a comprehensive overview of the development of your project so far, and as such, you should include information on the activities undertaken to date, any examples of best practice within your project, information on how the project is being managed, and details of any difficulties you may have encountered and how these are being addressed, as well as reporting on project expenditure. Please ensure that the information you include in your interim report covers the period from the start date of your project up to the end date of the reporting period in your grant agreement. If the report is an eligible request for the next payment, then the NA will make any payment due within 60 days of receiving the report. The reporting period and submission deadline for your interim reports, if applicable, can be found in Article 1.4 of your grant agreement. Here are the facts that you need to know about your final report. You will need to submit a final report for your project within 60 days of the end date of your project. Please be aware that reports should not be submitted before the end date of your project, as we cannot assess this any earlier. The purpose of the final report is to allow the national agency to assess the completed project in terms of quality, as well as ensuring the recorded budget consumption of your grant is eligible. The budget section of your final report is drawn straight from the information you input on Mobility Tool Plus. Therefore, another reason to make sure that you're keeping the tool up to date over the course of the year. It will make life much easier at final report stage. The draft of the report will update with any new information, so you can start working on it as soon as you have added at least one mobility. As you add more mobilities, the budget information in the report will automatically be updated the next time they open the draft. You should make sure that all the information in Mobility Tool Plus is accurate and up to date, and so the budget in the final report is correct before submission. Once you've completed the narrative sections of the report, it will be ready to submit, and the tool will ask you to annex a signed, scanned declaration of honour as you did for your application. Please ensure you fill out all the information in the declaration of honour, the date and the place of signature, and that the signature is original. Once you submit the report, it is sent to our systems ready for assessment. As mentioned earlier, the final report automatically pre-fills information through from the Mobility Tool Plus, which includes the participating organisations, the number of participants and the type of mobility they carried out, for example, staff training abroad, what learning recognition has been received by the participants, for example, a Europass certificate, participant report statistics, including details on mobilities and percentages of positive responses, the final grant amount reported in the tool, and the spend against each individual budget heading. You will have to manually complete several actions of narrative within the report. A summary of the completed project, which may be used on the Erasmus Plus Dissemination Platform, EPRP, a description of the project objectives and how you evaluated the extent to which these objectives were met, the project's practical arrangements, and the project management and monitoring processes that you had in place, the project activities and how they were organized, the learning outcomes gained by the project's participants, the impact of the project on its participants, participating organizations, and other stakeholders if relevant, and how the project results and achievements have been disseminated. We're happy for you to use your application to reference original aims, objectives, and plans. However, the final report should be written after activities have taken place and tell us what actually happened. Please include information such as any changes, any issues faced, anything that went particularly well, and unexpected impact. Participant reports. All learners and staff who have completed mobility activities abroad must complete a participant report after the end of the mobility. The only exception to this is accompanying persons. Completion of the participant report is obligatory for all who take part, and it is your responsibility as the project coordinator to ensure that 100% of your participants fill in and submit the participant report. Any organisation with a less than 100% completion rate will see their final grant reduced and will not receive payment for any mobilities missing a participant report. The participant report takes the form of an online survey hosted by EU Survey and asks the learner or staff member to rate their mobility experience based on a number of different factors, such as the quality of the placement, the level of support received from the sending and receiving organisations, and on their own personal and professional development. That learners who have undertaken a placement of a month or more are also asked to evaluate the linguistic support that they received. Once the participant has completed and submitted the report, a PDF copy of the report appears in Mobility Tool Plus and can be viewed by the project coordinator. The Mobility Tool Plus will automatically email a link to the survey to each participant the day after the mobility end date. If for any reason the link is not received by the participant, the project coordinator can also go into Mobility Tool Plus and request that the report is resent, although they should double check that the participant's email address has been entered correctly and that there are no other factors preventing receipt of the link, such as individual email settings for spam or junk mail. Either way, we would recommend that you get participants to complete them while the mobility experience is still fresh in their minds and while you are still able to contact them to ensure 100% completion of reports. It is possible for your grant total to be reduced. This is a rare occurrence, but stems from the poor implementation of a project or a poor quality final report. At the outcome of the final report assessment, if the score is 25% of your if 25% of your organizational support budget is cut, if the final report scores at least 40 and below 50 points. It will be 50% if the final report scores at least 25 and below 40%, and 75% if the final report scores below 25 points. A grant reduction may also be applied to the individual support and travel headings where there are missing participant reports. Now we will go through some information on Mobility Tool Plus. Mobility Tool Plus is the online management and reporting system for all projects awarded a grant under the European Commission's Erasmus Plus programme. It has been developed by the European Commission and it is a contractual requirement for all projects to use the tool in order to report their project activities to the UK National Agency. This will include identifying participants and flows, completing and updating budgetary information, as well as generating, completing and submitting reports to the UK National Agency. As outlined in the special conditions of the project's grant agreement, your project management team must at least once a month during the project encode and update any new information regarding the participants and the mobility activities. Please do not leave this until the very end of the project. We recommend that you set a recurring date every month to check and update Mobility Tool Plus with details regarding the latest completed project activities. What should you do if you see this screen when you first log in? First, check that they are not using an EU login username or email address which was not registered in your project application to either the contact person or legal representative. Only the contact person and the legal representative are automatically given access to their project in Mobility Tool Plus. If the contact person or legal representative has changed their email address at all from the one which is listed in their grant agreement, then you need to contact the national agency for this to be changed in our system and access granted. You should not be changing your email address in Mobility Tool Plus yourself, as the data must be changed from our end. We can always check if your email address matches the one in our system before you attempt to log in. Your EU login should be the email address you use to register, so even if this changes, please continue to log in using your old email address as your username for EU login. Please note if you have not received notification from the national agency that we have uploaded your project onto Mobility Tool Plus and you have no other projects, then this is the screen you will see. We will inform you once we send your project to Mobility Tool Plus. How can you add a new contact to the project? Open the project in Mobility Tool Plus, click on the Contacts tab, and click the green Create button. Fill in all of the required fields marked Value Required in orange, and make sure the Access to Project box is ticked. Please note only contacts from the beneficiary organisation can have access to the project. Please note it is advised that access to the project is limited to just the contact person and legal representative. However, you may add additional contacts from your organisation and allow them access to the project. If additional access to Mobility Tool Plus is granted, it will still be the responsibility of the authorised contact person and the legal representative to ensure the data in Mobility Tool Plus is up to date and accurate. Both beneficiaries and NA staff can use the History information box within the Details tab of Mobility Tool Plus to see when the mobility tool was last updated and by which contact. How can you add a single mobility? Open the project in Mobility Tool Plus and navigate to the Mobilities tab. Click the green Create button to open the Create Mobility form. Complete the form from the top, ensuring that the information is consistent with the original grant application and/or any approved contract amendments. Click Save when finished. Please remember to click the Calculate button in the EU Mobility Total Grant section of the form before clicking Save, in order to check that the information inputted does not contain any errors or ineligible amounts. How can you check and edit the details for one of the mobilities? To view detailed information about a mobility individual, within the Mobilities tab, click the View button, which is a screen symbol on the right-hand side of the individual's listing. To edit the information, click the Edit button, a pencil symbol, on the right-hand side of the individual's listing in order to open the Edit Mobility form, similar to the Create Mobility form. This section covers some other ECIT tools, the first of which is EPRP. This is the Erasmus Plus project results platform on which projects can disseminate results from their projects. It is not a contractual requirement for Key Action 1 projects to disseminate on the platform like it is for Key Action 2 strategic partnership projects. However, it is recommended as it features your organisation and your results for others to see. The more information you put in here, the more of an idea other organisations can gather about the kind of activities you undertake and the quality of those activities from your dissemination materials. EPRP is a dissemination platform that offers a comprehensive overview of all projects funded under the Erasmus Plus programme. You can upload results on the platform, such as videos, reports from an event, leaflets relevant to the dissemination plan of your project. Documents can be outputs, a physical result like a video or an information pack created for or by the project, a description or reporting of an outcome that is developed because of the project taking place, i.e. the percentage of learner participants who are now in employment or certain knowledge that was gained during the project. A guidance on relevant project results is available directly on the platform. If your project is identified as good practice or a success story, it will be flagged as such on the platform. It can also be used for communication activities by the national agency and the European Commission. Additionally, the platform can increase your international scope as the public interface allows anyone to view your project profile. You could be identified by other organizations as a potential partner for future projects. How do you use the platform? You can only submit results onto the platform once your report is in its final report stage, once your grant agreement is countersigned by the national agency, the contact person named in the agreement receives an email notification explaining how to access the platform. You will need an EU login account. If you wish to have further guidance on the E+PRP, you are able to contact your project officer or the helpline. Moving on to online linguistic support, or OLS. This is the Commission's online platform to support language learning within Erasmus Plus Key Action 1 mobility projects. The Erasmus Plus online linguistic support, OLS, provides language assessments and courses for Erasmus Plus participants and aims to improve their knowledge of the language in which they will work, study, or volunteer abroad. The OLS is available for Key Action 1 mobility projects in the fields of higher education, VET, youth, and the ESC. It currently supports participants using 24 European languages. You can see them on the slide as their main language of instruction, work, or study. Other languages may become available in time. As already mentioned, the OLS service is for VET learners completing mobilities from 19 days to 12 months, so it is not available for VET staff. Online language courses are available at all language competency levels for Dutch, English, French, German, Italian, and Spanish. Levels A, B, and C of the Common European Framework of Reference for Languages. Language courses up to B2 level are available for Portuguese. Language courses at A1 level are available for Bulgarian, Croatian, Czech, Danish, Greek, Finnish, Hungarian, Polish, Romanian, Slovak, and Swedish. For all other Key Action 1 VET or youth participants completing mobilities which are less than 19 days, linguistic preparation is financed from the budget section Organisational Support. The purpose of OLS. OLS aims to improve participants' knowledge of the language in which they will work, study, or volunteer abroad. The tool makes linguistic support accessible in a flexible way and contributes to a specific objective of the Erasmus Plus programme, which is to promote language learning and linguistic diversity. In addition, the OLS aims to ensure a better quality of learning mobility and measure the impact of the programme on linguistic skills. The OLS is administered via licenses, which are linked to a particular Key Action 1 project as specified in the grant agreement between the national agency and the beneficiary. Licenses are not language specific, and applicant organisations request OLS licenses within their application forms. Usage of the OLS involves a mandatory assessment of language competences, which can be taken in any of the 24 languages supported by the OLS. This consists of 2 stages, a language assessment to be undertaken 15 days before a mobility, and a language assessment to be undertaken after a mobility. Please note that the results of the first language assessment will not preclude participants from taking part in the mobility activity, but should be considered by organisations when completing learner agreements. A voluntary language course tailored to the language proficiency of each participant, with reference to the Common European Framework of Reference for Languages. The proficiency level is established at the time of the first assessment. Within VET, the national agency has received a very high number of licenses from the EC. Therefore, it encourages maximum take-up of OLS course licenses by allocating them to all beneficiaries whose mobilities fit the eligibility criteria for the OLS. Beneficiaries should be aware the NA does not penalise the project for not using the awarded licenses, but the final report may be scored more highly if licenses are used. It is the national agency's responsibility to allocate licenses to beneficiaries in E+Link, validate licenses for each project via the OLS platform, monitor license consumption, respond to caseload and helpline queries, manage requests for additional licenses. It is the responsibility of the beneficiary to distribute licenses to learners and/or volunteers, where relevant, decide which participants should take the language courses, monitor license consumption, ensure full uptake of licenses, and report on license use. The last section of this webinar will cover dissemination and further support. Dissemination can take place in many ways. Lots of projects tend to use social media through posts on Twitter, participant blog posts, or Instagram or Facebook posts, but not realizing that this can be accepted as dissemination. It is worth mentioning these in your final report and trying to upload to EPRP if possible to showcase this to other projects, members of the public, and potential partners for the future. Remember, any outputs or outcomes from the project can be and should be disseminated. The success of your project is something that the program really wants to encourage you to showcase wherever possible. Even where these project results are not shared with the program, they can be useful for future project recruitment and internal dissemination within your organizations. It is also worth pointing out that while we also now have an impact and dissemination toolkit on our website, within which you can find many resources regarding impact and dissemination and how you can encourage, record, and implement. This is with the aim of improving the quality of the impact of your program overall. To see how other projects have tackled dissemination in their projects, please take a look at EPRP or all the Erasmus Stories page on our website. You will receive communication from your dedicated project officer at the national agency, who will be your first point of contact throughout the life cycle of your project. They will be on hand to offer support and guidance, as well as keep you informed of any updates, reminders, and deadlines. They are also able to provide various forms for processes, such as monitoring or contract amendments. If they are away from the office or unavailable, then you will also be given contact details for the general inbox and helpline, where you can contact any of our staff members who will be happy to help. The 2020 handbook will be sent to you electronically, along with the project officer introduction. In the meantime, it has been uploaded to the website, and we strongly recommend that you read this thoroughly. This document will provide you with everything you need surrounding each aspect of the project life cycle. It provides information and guidance and should be used in the first instance when encountering difficulties. The 2020 Erasmus Plus Programme Guide is a great source of information for anything related to the project. We would especially recommend using it when you are unsure if a proposed activity or change to the project is eligible according to the key action you are contracted to. This is readily available on our website, and copies of it will be available to browse at the convention. We would strongly recommend you sign up to our newsletter online if you haven't already done so. It provides monthly updates on events, activities, case studies, news, and general information. The website contains a wealth of information on Erasmus Plus projects. A particularly useful section for guidance is the frequently asked questions page. The website is updated on a regular basis and will provide you with up-to-date information on any news and events. It also signposts you to help and support for areas of Erasmus Plus, such as IPALE, ECVET, Mobility Tool Plus, and OLS. Finally, please here are our contact details if you ever need to get in touch with us. Our helpline hours are normally 9 until 5:30 Mondays to Thursdays, but it closes slightly earlier on Fridays at 5 p.m. Unfortunately, due to the current COVID-19 circumstances, our helpline is closed, but you can still reach us by email. Please note that we try to ensure emails are answered within 2 working days, but there may be a delay due to the current circumstances. We hope you have found this webinar interesting and informative. Please note that we do aim to host a formal startup convention in October, but this may be subject to changes due to continued developments in government guidelines. Further information and invitations will be sent to you once a date has been confirmed and necessary arrangements will be made. We wish you the best of luck with your Erasmus Plus projects and want to remind you that we are on hand for support and guidance where necessary, and we look forward to seeing you at the convention.